This is a presentation of Northeast Streaming Sports.
It just might be the greatest sports franchise in the history of sports. A place where legends are made, and there's always something to talk about. Get ready to immerse yourself in pinstripes. Start spreading the news, hosted by Paul Semendinger and E.J. Fagan, a couple of doctors with a prescription for Yankee fever. And now, here's Dr. Paul Semendinger and Dr. E.J. Fagan. Get ready to start spreading the news.
Yes, indeed, ladies and gentlemen, here we are. It is time to start spreading the news. This, of course, Paul Semendinger. Dr. EJ will be with me in 1 second, but let me remind you all that the Start Spreading the News Yankee podcast is brought to you by Artemisia Publishing. You can find their many phenomenal works, books across a gazillion different genres. Artemisia Publishing is an independent, fully traditional publisher out of New Mexico. Go check out their wonderful selection of books at apbooks.net. And so now, without any further ado, I bring in the brilliant, the great, the wonderful Dr. E.J. Fagan.
Hi, Paul.
Hello, Doctor. How are you today?
Doing pretty good.
I am as well. We have a lot to talk about. The Yankees had a big day today. Maybe we should start there. So the weekend before the All-Star game, the Yankees took 2 of 3 from the Orioles. They could have swept. We talked about it last week, but they lost the final game. People who are ready to write the Yankees off all of a sudden said, they're back, they're back. Then we had the All-Star break, and then the Yankees won a game. They said, see, they're back. Then they lost a game. No, they're not. Then they won a game. Oh, no, they lost the game. Second game. Oh, they're doomed. Then they won a game. They split the 4-game series with the Rays, a wraparound series. And they seem to me like a traditional 500 club. I'm going to share you some numbers, but what's your gut right now?
I think they're better than that. I think they're a 500 club that has Soto and Judge, right? If that makes sense. Like, I think it's a team that they're still, I think, second in the majors in run differential. I think they still have the 3rd or 4th best record in the majors. They've been less than a 500 team over the last month or so. So have been good during that time. But I think the Yankees have a floor because they have these top players. And then you add in a Cole, now that he's pitching well again. You add in a Luis Hill. You can build out a team that I think is significantly better than that. But still a flawed team. And so I think when we ask ourselves, like, are the Yankees out of it? Are they going to get better? I think the way you answer that question is, okay, have they addressed their biggest flaws? And I don't think they have yet. But I think we know what those flaws are. And I also think we know what the strengths are. So yeah, I'm going to disagree with you, but you give me your pitch.
Yes. So, when the Yankees have a big win, like they had a big win today, 9-1, I think it was. And look how great they are. They're back. They're super. And everybody gets all excited. So just for fun, I wanted to look up a typical 500 ball club. So I didn't do a whole lot of research on this. I just said, let me try to find a 500 ball club. And I think last year's San Francisco Giants, they were going to get Aaron Judge. They didn't get Aaron Judge. And then I think they had a pretty mediocre season. And they did. So I looked up the 2023 Giants. They ended up 79-83. They're basically, for all intents and purposes, a 500 club. And I saw a lot of similarities between that club, not personnel-wise, just performance-wise. At one point, they were 60-49. They shut out their opponents 13 times. The Yankees have done it 6 times. They're on pace for 10. That's close. They were shut out that many times. They threw 11 shutouts over the season. The Yankees have done 7. They're on pace for 11. They had 38 comeback wins. The Yankees have 23. They're on pace for 37. They were really great at times, like they were 17-12 in May and then 18-8 in June. You can't stop these guys. Sort of sounds like the Yankees. And then I just started making a random list of blowouts. April 3rd, they won a game 12-3. April 6th, 16-6. May 26th, 15-1. May 29th, 14-4. I'll only do a couple more. June 6th, 10-4. June 11th, 13-3. June 13th, 11-3. June 17th, 15-0. To me, when I just looked at this, I was saying I wanted to find a typical 500 team, and I picked a random team, and that looks exactly like the Yankees. There are days when they look unbeatable, and obviously I didn't watch the Giants last year, but it looks like there were days when they were unbeatable. People go, look how many times they've come back to win. 38 times. Well, that's the Yankees are on pace to do that. They had big wins. They shut out people. They got shut out. They were really great. They had great months, but they weren't a great team. And my worry is if the Yankees don't make any big deals in the next week or so, that's what we're going to have. We're going to have a team that maybe they'll be 81-81, but they could be 79-83. I mean, but I like your point about Judge and Soto. But
yeah, I mean, the question is who are the best players on last year's Giants team? I'm looking at Lamont Wade Jr. with a 790 OPS as their best hitter, 120 OPS plus. I'm looking at their second best hitter, Jock Peterson, who only played against righties with a 764 OPS. After that, you know, they have a bunch of guys that look kind of like the Yankees middle, and they have a bunch of guys who look like the Yankees worst players. Maybe not as bad as, say, DJ LeMahieu has been so far, but pretty bad, right? Brandon Crawford, 36-year-old shortstop, wasn't a great defender last year, had a 587 OPS. Then you look at their pitching staff, and, you know, they had Logan Webb, who is really good, and I'd say is roughly equivalent to Garrett Cole. And then you have, you know, a bunch of guys that I think don't really measure up to the Yankees pitching staff. Alex Cobb at a 3.87 ERA in San Francisco, which is, you know, pretty average. Anthony Desclafani, 4.88 ERA. Sean Manaea. They had a lot of injuries to their staff. They had to play Ross Stripling a lot. He wasn't very good. Their bullpen, basically the same as the Yankees. Solid closer, a couple of middle relievers, a bunch of guys who aren't very good. So it's a very similar team, other than the Yankees have probably one or two better starters than their number 2-3 starters. And I think the Yankees have Juan Soto and Aaron Judge, right? Like there's a real difference there. Now I take your point that I think the Yankees will regret it if they don't address their flaws. I think their flaws are addressable. I'm a little troubled by the lack of trade rumors really from anyone revolving around hitters. Like no one wants to trade a hitter right now. The Yankees need a couple of hitters, but the good news is that it's not that hard to improve this team. Anyone will do for the most part to say do better than DJ LeMahieu. I think that, you know, if I had to give some pessimism, I'd say other than maybe Giancarlo Stanton, I don't think the Yankees have a lot coming off the injured list. I don't think that's going to solve the problem for them. I think they got to go externally and get someone. I think the San Francisco Giants have some players I'd love to get, right? So like, I think you're being a little too pessimistic. This is a team that has scored 100, 112, whatever more runs prior to today, or including today, I'm not sure, than it's allowed. Now a lot of that was early in the season, right? They've been worse since. But you know, those are the same players, right? They're not injured. You know, if you look at, for example, the Braves not only lost Ronald Acuna Jr. and Spencer Strider, they just lost Ozzie Albies, their second baseman, for 2.5 months or something like that. They're not going to be able to say Ozzie Albies, you know, will continue to be have the same production he had earlier. The Yankees have been kind of lucky that way. And I think, I think that the slump is weird, and I think they have what it takes to get out of it. It's just that every day it goes on for longer, the more you say, you know, you got to do at least something external.
All right. So it's just that there isn't a recent history either of the Yankees somehow being successful that you could say, like in 1978, before your time, the Yankees had been to the World Series in 76, and then they won the World Series in 77. And you just said, well, these guys have done it before. They've overcome. Maybe they can. They came back, and they did come back. these Yankees don't have that. They don't have guys who've
I think baseball teams are a sum of their parts for the most part. I don't really buy that. What's happening now is about the team. I think it's about the players. And I think that what we've seen in this roster is that you just have a bunch of players who aren't very good. And whether that's Gleyber Torres with his strange, off and on situation where he goes into these terrible slumps and can't get out of them, has all the talent in the world. That's he's just not very good, right? I think that's Gleyber Torres. I think that DJ LeMahieu is 36 years old or 37 years old. I forget what he just turned. He's just not very good right now. I think Nestor Cortez just turned 30 or is about to turn 30, and he's looking like he's not as good as he used to be. And I think the question is like, is there any slack to pull on this team? And other than maybe Verdugo, who is just not playing like the back of his baseball card. We talked about this yesterday in the Bronx Beat podcast, and John, one of our new panelists,
I heard about him. Yes.
He had a cool theory, which I love, which I'm about to experience firsthand, which is that Verdugo has a newborn child, and his performance has dropped off a lot since his newborn child was born. So maybe he's just tired. I have thoughts about that, but it's a good enough theory for me. I wonder if there's something that you can fix there.
Pacifier?
I was going to say expensive babysitter, but or pay for your relative to come for I don't know. I think I like the theory, and I also like the fact that there's an all-star break, so maybe you got a little bit more rest. But I think the Yankees are going to have to upgrade. They're going to have to find at least a platoon partner for Verdugo. I think there's a good name that we haven't talked about that John also brought up on the podcast yesterday. It's a good episode. Everybody should listen to it. That you could imagine fixing some of Verdugo's problems. I think we talked about guys like Matt Chapman last week, who I think would fix some of the problems in this roster for DJ LeMahieu. And I think that goes a long way. Like, I think that one of the core problems of this roster, I think core problem number one is bullpen. Fixable at the trade deadline. It sounds like they're going to try. We'll see this week what happens. I think the other problem that is very fixable on this roster is not having a cleanup hitter, right? Not having someone to bat behind, or not having really anyone to protect Judge and Soto. And Judge and Soto have shown that when people pitch to them, they hit home runs. Soto has never really stopped hitting home runs because he's got Judge to protect him. But Judge has been walked like crazy over the last few weeks. And then a bunch of guys grounded the double plays, right? Torres and Verdugo have especially been grounding the double plays. Finally, they moved Austin Wells up, which I think is a good move. Hit a home run today. He's been really good lately. He has, over the last month and a half, I forget where he cut it off. He's got an OPS well over 800. And he's also just a guy with a track record, right? It's not like he's
a track record in the minor leagues.
Yeah. I mean, he's got talent, right? It was not shocking to anybody that Austin Wells can have an 800 OPS in the majors. I think it's a little bit shocking that, for example, Ben Rice had the start to his career. That
holy cow, EJ! All right, you're gonna have to let us go on a tangent because Angelo has a question.
Let's do it.
I believe it was Paul who brought this up on a previous show. Should we hold off on anointing Rice as the future first baseman after a fast start? He seems to be striking out in an alarming rate. I think it's about half the time he strikes out now. Yes. Yep. Small sample sizes do not prove anything, and this is my point.
Oh, he also doesn't have that much time in the high minors, right? Like Rice is really inexperienced, and look, he's kind of exposed right now. He's batting first in front of Judge and Soto. He's going to see all strikes, and if he can't punish it, it's not going to work. It's exactly this problem that Volpe had. I mean, we talked about Jonathan India on the show last week. I think the Yankees need to trade for a right-handed leadoff hitter, and then if Rice is your number 7 hitter and playing first base, seems like he's playing a decent enough defensive first base, and he's got like the third best OPS on the team, right? So he's still, the numbers are still solid, but he's striking out a lot, and I just think he's exposed. And I think he's, I think Rice has talent, but maybe you don't want to bet on it. If Pete Alonso's available, he's better bet than Rice. If Vlad Guerrero Jr. is available, I will get rid of Rice in a second for him. I think it's telling that they only have 3 good hitters, and then they're trying to figure out who the fourth one is, so they have a top 4 in the lineup. That's not a good position to be in.
This is why I say I think they are more like the team that we've seen over the last month than the team that has this great winning percentage and this great record, because most of that was, again, I can just see if this was the Yankees, this 2023 Giants, they won 18-8 in June. They won games by the score of 10-4, 13-3, 11-3, 15-0. They're unstoppable. Their pitchers don't give up runs. They score runs in bunches, but they were stoppable.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think what's the problem over the last month? Or last month and a half. I think I kind of point to 3 problems.
Yes.
One is the bullpen evaporated, basically.
Correct.
You had a couple of points where I think Clay Holmes, he allowed some ground balls, which he's going to do. Like I don't think Clay Holmes really evaporated. I think he just got beat a couple of times.
And he doesn't throw enough strikes.
Yeah, he's just not. But he's not Mariano Rivera, right? Like he is a solid closer. Solid closers get beat.
But if you end up walking guys and falling behind hitters, if you don't have good enough stuff to put them away, believe me, this is my life as a pitcher. You got to throw strikes. You can't be walking guys, because that's an extra runner. That's an extra guy on base. Sure. That just makes it harder for you to get out of. Because then when the ground ball goes
that's
through,
just Clay Holmes.
Now
Clay Holmes is going to do that. Clay Holmes is going to blow games.
Correct.
Any closer is going to blow games. Clay Holmes is going to blow a decent number of games, and he blew a few, and the Yankees didn't win those games. He's not the bullpen problem. The bullpen problem is everyone else.
Correct. He's part of the problem.
I think Luke Weaver is stabilized a little bit. I think Michael Tonkin, I'm getting more confident in every day.
I don't understand.
And then you have all the other guys, right? And they for, I think, a big chunk of June were blowing a lot of games. At the same time, the starting pitching, I don't think it collapsed. I don't think that's the right way to say it, but it definitely was not good. Cole's first couple of starts weren't good. Cortez has had a rough month. He'll had those 2 or 3 starts that weren't good. So they all kind of stopped playing well at the same time. I think that's stabilized. I think the Yankees starting pitching is now fine. It's not the elite staff it was in April and May. Maybe one of those guys rounds back into form and they become that again. But they're fine. Like you look at their stats compared to other starting pitching, they're good. And I think Cole in particular is looking like Garrett Cole right now, and I think that's a good sign. I think it's telling the Yankees are thinking about trading for a top starting pitcher. I'm a little puzzled by it because I just think they need hitting, but they just may be who's available, and Garrett Crochet might be available, and so you trade for him, right? He's one of those players, or Tarek Skubal's the other one. Those guys would immediately be the best or second best pitcher in this rotation. So I think that's stabilized.
Listen to me. Back in February and traded Spencer Jones for Corbin Burns.
I mean, I think it would have been a great trade. But that trade didn't happen. And now, and they had a great starting staff to start the year without him. But then let's think about hitting. I think 2 things happened during this slump with hitting. First off was, especially at the beginning of the bad streak, Soto and then Judge had some injuries and they slumped. I forget. Judge actually had like 2 weeks or so where he was a mere average hitter. Correct. And Aaron, the Yankees, he went from being Babe Ruth to being an average hitter. That's a big step down. Soto, around the time of that hand injury, also had a pretty bad slump that I think was mostly just bad luck, just watching him. But still, he wasn't hit. They have both come out of that slump, and they're both at the top of their game right now. But the rest of the lineup didn't. And other than Austin Wells and maybe Trent Grisham, really everybody turned into a potato at exactly the same time. So Torres, Verdugo, Volpe, LeMahieu, Trevino, all of them were as bad as any, 4 through 8 set of hitters in the major leagues. And in a really kind of pathetic way, they were just hitting ground balls to second base constantly. Weak ground ball, weak ground ball, weak ground ball. Every once in a while, they get a double because a ground ball goes past the third baseman, right? It got bad. And the question is that solved? Because to me, that is the reason for this slump. You can't, a team can't count on Judge being Babe Ruth all the time, right? Judge sometimes can't even carry a team when he's just being Babe Ruth because baseball is a team sport. But when he and Soto are being at the top of their games, you can do a lot with just those two, but not when they're then getting walked every other at bat, and then you lose them to a double play. I don't think they've solved that problem. I don't think there's really any sign for most of those guys coming out of it. It was nice to see LeMahieu and Volpe hit home runs today, but you got to see it for an extended period of time before you believe any of it. And neither of them have given you much reason to believe that this is the part of a turnaround.
It's amazing though when it happens, like out of the blue, everybody comes out. Everybody's been hiding. He's back. He's back. Look at that.
I mean, remember Gleyber Torres hit a really clutch home run about 2 weeks ago, won a game for them. And then went into a terrible slump, right? Like this is why I hate the psychology, the trying to read players psychologically.
I agree, and I hate when they say that. Oh, maybe this is the hit that gets them out of the slump. No. It's so pedantic, if that's the word. It's just dumb.
Yeah, and for some of them, it may not be a psychological problem. LeMahieu just might be cooked, right? Mm-hmm. There might not be a version of LeMahieu that can be an effective major league hitter anymore. Ex-Woba has been a little more confident in LeMahieu than otherwise, but I just don't see it. Like when Austin Wells was putting up really big ex-Wobas and wasn't getting any hits, like you could see it. Like he was just hitting the ball hard and players were catching it. And he wasn't playing a lot, so he wasn't getting that many opportunities. And so, there wasn't that much of a chance for his luck to equal out. And then he went into a slump, a real slump. That showed up in the data. And I understood it. The ex-Woba data thinks that LeMahieu is good, but I just don't see it. Like he's not driving the ball in any real way. He's hitting a lot of weak to medium ground balls, and that's just not going to get it done. Like that's just a bad way. Volpe was the exact same thing, right? He looks, LeMahieu looks like a slow Volpe, if that's an analogy. So I think the Yankees just need 2 or 3 guys. They need a couple of hitters. Stan may be one of those. I think you could fix Verdugo by not playing him and playing Trent Grisham, who's been playing really well lately. I think Grisham's got an 800 OPS over the last month and a half since he started playing regularly. I think that's pretty good. And, Judge can play left field and there's your outfield. I'm not sure if Rice is the guy yet at first base. I think he deserves a little more time. And
yeah, of course he's going to get the time, but Angelo, I'm glad he brought that up. We can't be anointing these guys after he had a 3 home run game. Like I wrote an article. I listed the guys who had 3 home run games, and I believe one of the guys in Major League history who had a 3 home run game was a guy named Aaron Boone. I think he actually did it twice, if I remember the statistics I looked up.
Yeah, Aaron Judge told Ben Rice when he got back into the dugout after the 3rd one, he said, "Welcome to the club," which is kind of nice. Look, let's not write the Yankeeographies, right? Like you need time here. I think Ben Rice will be a good hitter, but he also could be someone who has to go down to the minors and then come back up. Like doesn't have that much senior experience. Right now he's their best first baseman and it's not even close. But if he's still, hitting like he has over the last week and a half or so, when Rizzo comes back, that's going to be an interesting discussion. I don't think Rizzo's any good either. I think Rizzo's another guy who's probably a little cooked. So like, I think it's a big trade deadline. I expect the Yankees to trade for guys, but it also just may be the case that like no one's available. So there's a report the other day that the Reds, who are, I think, like kind of in that NL wildcard race, but like so are 8 other teams, and I think a one above 500 record gets you the last wildcard spot right now, and like 4 teams have it. So they're thinking about trading guys, but quote only rentals. What does that mean? I don't know, but it might not mean Jonathan India. It might not mean, it might be that there's not a lot of good hitters available. One of the reasons why like you want more teams that are kind of close to 500 or even above 500 to be sellers is because they have good players. Like the White Sox just don't have that many guys that you want to trade for and would improve this Yankees team. They're just not a good ball club.
So let me ask you that question, because I keep hearing this. I hear it a lot in a lot of different circles. The trade deadline isn't going to be as exciting because of the fact that so many teams consider themselves in it because of the expanded playoffs. And I get the idea of the expanded playoffs. More teams will be in it and generate more interest. But in a way, does it sort of then dilute the interest in something like the trade deadline and the hopes for some teams? Because I think that's part of it. And the other part is I don't like false hope. Well, maybe that could happen. We might go for ice cream later. Oh, all right. Are we going to go for ice cream? No, we're not. Yeah, this idea, well, if we are just a game or two over 500, we're really bad, but we're kind of good. And we might make the playoffs. Then we might win. It's a false hope. So how does that play into your feeling about?
So
the expanded
I think I hate the 1-game playoff wild card, and I think this is better than that. 3 games. So you have the right number of teams, with six teams in each in each league. So I think that is or 5 teams in each league. I think that is the best option, the better option than what they had before it. I don't think the expanded playoffs are the reason why there's going to be no sellers in the National League. The American League is fine. Like the American League is like half the league is going to sell because the American League is a better league right now than the National League. There's top teams like the Yankees, the Guardians, the Mariners. There's a class of teams below them, which are pretty good, like the Royals, the Red Sox, the Orioles, right? That group of teams is pretty good. None of them are romping away with the league right now. And then there's a bunch of really, really bad teams, the Athletics, the White Sox, and a few teams which are going to be 3 or 4 games below 500, or are 3 or 4 games below 500, like the Rays. And they're going to sell because they're not going to make the playoffs, because in order to make the playoffs in the American League, you're going to have to win like 90 games. That's normal. And the extra playoff spot doesn't really change that much. In the National League, you have 2 super teams, the Phillies and the Dodgers, 1 failed super team because of injuries, the Braves, and just nothing below them, right? You have a bunch of bad teams below them that are all well below 500 against the American League. And just teams that so the Mets are 50 and 48. They currently hold the wild card spot. The Diamondbacks have 49 losses. The Pirates have 49 losses. The Padres have 50 losses. The Giants have 52. The Cubs have 53. The Reds have 53. The Nationals have 53. It's just a giant bunch of mediocre teams.
And is that good for baseball?
I think I think it'd be better if some of these teams were better. I don't think it has anything to do with the wild card.
Well, I think part of it does, because, and I believe this is the way the Yankees have approached their team for the last 10 years or so. I don't think when they look at the team that they say, yeah, we did everything we could to put the absolute very best team on the field. We are putting a very good team out on the field, and we should make the playoffs, and then anything can happen in the postseason. And let's hope anything happens good for us, and we can make the World Series and maybe win the World Series, rather than saying, I want to have the best team. And when you have expanded playoffs and you can get in and anything can happen by being pretty good, I think the impetus is to be pretty good. The impetus isn't to be great, because we see great teams lose in the playoffs, because that's what happens in short series. No,
I think I disagree. One is that the playoffs are a crapshoot, and that's not understating things. Like the Diamondbacks and the Rangers were not the 2 best teams in baseball last year. Let's presume. Let's start with the premise that the Yankees have a budget, right? Like we can argue that budget's too low. I think it's too low, but let's just say there's a budget. And so from Brian Cashman's perspective,
of course
he has a limited amount of resources to work with.
Correct.
I think that it is impossible for the Yankees to build a powerhouse team if they don't bring up young players.
I don't disagree with that.
Right. And so all of their decisions are made with that constraint, that they have to fill out their roster with players that are too expensive. And that means they have to make choices that sacrifice something. And so they have to go get Jay Happ rather than getting, I forget who the alternative was this year, but there was an ace they could have gotten for much more money, right? They have to keep playing LeMahieu and Stanton because they're just a big, massive money hole on their balance sheet. They have to get Anthony Rizzo rather than Freddie Freeman. those are decisions made because they've maxed out their budget on veterans.
Correct.
And you could build a better team if you had 2 or 3 more young hitters and a couple more young pitchers.
Right. But the other part of that is they spent foolishly. Listen, I was the only guy saying, thank you. I was the only guy in the whole world saying, don't re-sign DJ LeMahieu. He will not be worth it. I did all sorts of studies that showed second basemen don't age well, and how he was going to just play to his career averages, which wasn't really going to be all that great. And it was going to get worse as he got older. And so many people said, oh, but he signed for $15 million a year for 6 years. They're getting a bargain. And I'm saying, yeah, but it's still not going to be a good contract because now we have to pay 6 years of this. And he's going to.
I agree. I think you're right.
And then last year or the year before, whatever. Hey, Josh Donaldson's available. Sure, well, let's pay him $25 million to be terrible. If you're going to have a budget, you then have to be smart about where you spend your resources, and they spend in silly ways. Of course you're going to pay Soto. Of course you're going to pay Judge. Of course you're going to pay Garrett Cole. But then you have to find ways to be smarter about the other guys. Everybody in the world knew spending $25 million on Josh Donaldson was a bad idea.
I think the Yankees thought they were getting a deal, right? I think they said, Josh Donaldson could be an MVP, and we can get him for $25 million in 2.5 years, right? And the reason why they have to look for those deals is because they don't have any young guys to substitute.
That's correct.
I think if they had a prospect, a second baseman they were comfortable playing every day. Not a star, not replacing DJ LeMahieu as an MVP, none of that. I think they would have done it, and then they could have taken that money and gone out and signed another Soto or Judge, right? I think their problem is that they're trying to get deals that aren't really deals.
Correct.
But there's no third option, right? There's no
bad job
out there. There's no $5 million free agent out there.
Correct, but a guy like Jaime Candelario or whatever could have played third base for the Yankees instead of Josh Donaldson.
I mean, sure.
Gio Urshela could have played third base for the Yankees instead of Josh Donaldson.
I think Gio Urshela, he had one good year there, and he's not good right now, right? So, I think,
but he's not 25.
Sure,
he's not $25 million.
But but I don't think Gio Urshela helps you build a championship team.
No, I agree.
Right?
But neither did Josh Donaldson.
No, I agree. But they thought, I'm not saying they were right. They thought that the way to build a powerhouse team is to go out and get a bunch of deals. Aaron Hicks, right? They signed him to what they thought was a smart contract. It was like an 8-year contract worth $70 million.
Yes.
Right? It was a disaster. And here's the thing. I think Severino's extension, I think we can talk, I think is more defensible than
I agree.
Than the Hicks deal. But they said, Hicks, he could be really good and we can get him for cheap. And I think that's a decision you make out of weakness. I think that
we're saying the same thing basically.
And there's the thing, if they hadn't signed that guy, it's not like they had a young guy waiting to take his place. They would have had signed someone other flawed player or signed some other really good player at full price. The Yankees, Brian Cashman just hates paying full price. Like he has paid full price for Garrett Cole. He has paid it for Juan Soto. He's going to pay for Juan Soto and Aaron Judge. That's it. Every other player on this roster is either one of the handful of players they brought up or a deal they tried to get. A DFA guy, a guy like Nestor Cortez, who they kind of brought up after rounds of DFAing and was good. A project like Clay Holmes, or a guy who is more expensive than they should have been. Giancarlo Stanton was that guy, by the way. Right? That was not a good contract. I don't think anybody at the time thought Giancarlo Stanton is I don't think every team was lining up to trade for the Giancarlo Stanton contract, but his average annual value was low. So I think that Cashman said, for a $25 million average annual value, I can go out and get this really good player, even if that is not a contract I would sign today or anybody would sign today for him. Again, it's a move from weakness. You could have signed Bryce Harper to a larger contract with a higher average annual value, who would have been a better player. You could have signed Manny Machado to a deal, at least the first deal he signed was really good. The opt-out extension deal he signed was really, really bad. And the Padres are going to be hurting for that one. But there are all these options here. None of this is possible if you don't bring up a Volpe or a Wells every year, right? You have to do these guys get expensive after 3 or 4 years. So you have to have a steady stream of those guys, not all-stars, just good players. And because they don't have that, I just think they keep putting themselves in this position where they have been blessed with a massive amount of money and Aaron Judge, right? They just that came out of the sky. They were blessed that the San Diego Padres decided to trade them Juan Soto for very little. Even though Michael King's having a good season, that trade was incredible, right? That is something that they were able to luck out on because they had money they could absorb his $30 million salary and no one else could because of TV contracts and whatever. That is hiding the flaws of, I think, Brian Cashman, which is why he will never build a powerhouse roster unless he gets really lucky, unless the 2019 or whatever, the 2018, the next man up season magic happens again. And I'm just very skeptical that will ever happen again. That was a once in a lifetime thing. It gave us the idea that, the Yankees can find a Gio Urshela. They found Jose Trevino. They found all these guys, Diego Gregorius.
Mm-hmm.
I think they just got lucky.
I did too.
Or the rest of baseball has gone smarter, which is also a possibility. One thing I remember around that time, especially with Luke Voit, is the Yankees were one of the first teams to look at minor league exit velocity. And so they found some guys who maybe were underperforming a little bit, and they said, let's go get that guy. Everybody knows that's not a secret anymore. And so they can't find those guys reliably, which means they just got to make them themselves. They got to make good players on their own. And that Brian Cashman, that's the thing he has never been able to do in his entire career. And if I'm diagnosing the problem, that's the core problem, that all of these other problems are just are caused by the cascading effect of that one problem.
So if you own the Yankees and they don't make the playoffs or they lose in the first round, does that mean for you that it's time to move on from Brian Cashman and try another approach?
Yeah, I mean, I would. I wrote a post a couple weeks ago called "Fire Brian Cashman."
Mm-hmm.
I was particularly angry after one of the Red Sox losses, and yeah, I think I would have fired him last offseason. We talked about that on the show. I think ultimately the organization is his responsibility. And so anything that's a problem with that organization is ultimately something that he is responsible for. So maybe you say, hey, fire your farm director, get a new farm director, get a new amateur scout. That's fine. But that's all Brian Cashman, right? He gets responsibility for all of that.
He said, and that was always a big thing. I demanded and I wanted full control. Okay. Well, now you got it. But now that you have full control, you have to then take responsibility when it doesn't work. You can't have full control and say, well, it was out of my hands. No, it's full control. It's in your hands. So win, or we're going to try somebody else. Chris Rose has just reached out and said, need another pitcher and a big bad infielder. He's singing your praises there. Doctor.
Yeah, and look, I think we're gonna get it. Like the Yankees have apparently said we want to trade Spencer Jones for Skubal or Crochet. Skubal and Crochet are excellent pitchers. They're also basically the exact same pitcher. They're big, strong lefties with basically the two best starting pitchers in the American League this year, and have both been injured and haven't pitched a lot in recent years. They're basically Luis Hill. Those two guys and Luis Hill are just the same pitcher, except the other two are lefties. So it's exciting that they're connected to them. I was a little surprised because I thought they were going to use their relatively limited trade capital for hitters. But there's also some hitters out there that I still think are going to be that expensive. I just don't think Matt Chapman's going to cost that much. If you wanted to go out and get I think Jonathan India, you might have to give up a Spencer Jones, but maybe he's not available. I'm sympathetic a little bit to Cashman in that I just don't know how many elite players he will be available and he will be competing with who he'll be competing with for them. The Dodgers also need 4 hitters. I just wish he wasn't putting himself in this position again, where he needs to fill a bunch of holes. The Yankees are going to say until they have a replacement that they're going to ride with DJ LeMahieu, that he's just coming around and all that. But I have to imagine that they can see what we all see, that 36-year-old player is cooked. Other sports leagues have buyouts. So they have the ability to just say we're gonna give you your money to go away, and then you get rid of their cap hit, or at least a portion of their cap hit. I wish the baseball had that, because I think the Yankees would buy out guys, and I think LeMahieu is the first candidate for that. They also cut Aaron Hicks with a similar amount of money remaining. I think LeMahieu has more like clubhouse gravitas than Aaron Hicks.
Aaron Hicks at the end wasn't just a bad player. He was a bad player who, was looking like he was loafing and not caring. And he took the wrath of the anger of Yankee fans. DJ LeMahieu has capital because he was the machine.
And he was good as recently as last year.
And no one's happy that he's not doing well. In fact, everybody feels bad that he's not doing well.
And look, even bad LeMahieu in the past has been better than this, and better than every other player on this roster, right? He has an OPS well over 700 since he stopped being an MVP the last 3 seasons. That's good. Like, that tells me that DJ LeMahieu, even the diminished version of DJ LeMahieu, would be the improvement you're looking to trade for. I just don't know if he can even get back to that. Like, I think we have seen a genuinely diminished version of LeMahieu this year.
Agree. I agree too that they need to lock up Soto. Chris Rose telling us a lot of stuff today. DJ, Torres, and Rizzo can go. Yeah,
and they will. I think Torres and Rizzo are gone. Right, they're done. DJ, maybe they keep him around if he has a recovery late this season, but I think he's a DFA candidate if they had a replacement.
All right, let's go to a different topic. I think we agree on this one, and this one we can probably knock off in 34 and a half seconds, if not quicker. During the Yankee game today, Siri on Tampa Bay hit a home run. It was 4-0. He hit a solo shot to make it 4-1, and he just took his time going around the bases. And then late in the game, Juan Soto hit a bomb and took his time going around the bases. And in the newspapers and on the radio after the game, and in the newspapers that'll be published tomorrow, they're saying, oh, what a disgrace, guys going around the bases slowly. Listen, I grew up with Reggie. Reggie hit a home run and he'd sit there and he'd watch it. And then he'd go around the bases and he had his little home run trot. And like, who cares, right?
I hate it. Baseball players are so petty. They're like, you ran the bases in 14 seconds rather than 11 seconds. I'm mad at you. Like, who cares? Like, look, these two teams don't like each other. I like that they don't like each other. That's fun.
That is fun. Yes. But who cares how, right? Does that take away from your enjoyment of the game?
I mean, also, like, I've seen major league players be much worse at gloating than Siri and Soto. So, like, yeah, I don't care. It's drama. Look, the broadcast is going to look for drama. These are two teams that, have had some fights recently, which is interesting, but over real drama, like hitting players, or I guess think about the Orioles, but like, I like the drama. I like the fact that they don't like each other. I don't care about the home run trot.
I don't care about the home run trots either. All right. So, you sent me a list. I do not subscribe to The Athletic, so I could not read it, but you have a whole bunch of possible trade candidates. And I think this answers the question Angelo was putting up here. So many holes to fill. Who could the Yankees trade with to obtain multiple players, etc.? I think you might be able to touch on some of that.
Yeah, and let me give you a little shared screen here. Let's go to this one right here. All right, so Paul, I'm going to share my screen right now. All right, so this is the list from The Athletic. I'm going to zoom in a little bit here.
Yeah, keep zooming.
There we go.
Yeah, we go.
And I do think that there's a good candidate for Angelo's question about a good 2-for-1 deal that I could imagine happening. Tarek Skubal is the new trade rumor. We hadn't heard about that one recently. I didn't know he was for on the trade block. Guerrero Crochet, that rumor had been around for a little bit. And they're both really good. Skubal's probably a hair better. He's got a little bit more of a track record, at least of being healthy. And I think they're the two best pitchers in the American League this year. 2.5 years of team control. It's going to require a lot. It's going to be expensive. But I like Tarek Skubal. I think he's a good player.
I Let's take a quick step back. Let's say
Sure.
the Yankees get Skubal and or Crochet, and they're both top young pitchers.
Yep.
And God forbid they get him. He goes 0-6 the rest of the way, blows out his elbow, and Spencer Jones is who they trade for him, and he goes on to have an MVP career. I'm not going to criticize the Yankees for trading for a good young pitcher when it seemed like that was the best trade to make. I think a lot of people, what they then do is go, oh, the Yankees made this trade. Look how it turned out terrible. No, I think you have to base the trade on the merits at the time.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
If it made sense, then it didn't. They're not all going to work out.
Yeah, look, I think what I like about these two players in trading for them is they have ceiling. Right, you're trading for a potential ace. It might not work out. You realize it's risky, and that's why the Yankees. That's why they're available.
And that's why you trade a high-ranked minor leaguer for them, because they're good.
I mean, look, the White Sox traded Dylan Cease for, among others, Drew Thorpe, former Yankee prospect, to the Padres. If I had known that was the price for Dylan Cease, I would have waited I would have traded someone else to the Padres in order to get Soto, and I would have traded for Drew Thorpe. But you can't predict the future, and Dylan Cease is having a really great year, and maybe the Yankees can get him in the future. I would look, if the Yankees trade for Garrett Crochet, there will be an emergency episode of the Bronx Beat podcast. That's very big news. Either of these guys opens up a spot or like displaces one or two players in the rotation, right? You got Clark Schmidt coming back, and the Yankees are going to have to push someone, and maybe they trade someone. Maybe that allows them to trade Nestor Cortez for somebody, or these guys are both so good that if they're available, you give it a shot. They're not always going to be available. Crochet's 25, Skubal's 27. Both have 2.5 years of team control left. It would be a good trade. But I like the next guy on the list, Isaac Paredes, third baseman. He's got he's got 3 more years of team control left. He's on the Rays. Will the Rays trade in the division? I don't know. I think they probably will, is my guess. I don't know who the Rays would want, but they have a history of trading for, let's say, medium prospects. They like quantity. And they're really good at kind of finding those medium prospects, and maybe the Yankees have guys the Rays might want. He's a third baseman. He is a strict pull hitter. He's like the pulliest hitter in baseball. But without the shift, he's been pretty good. He can hit home runs even in Yankee Stadium because he's such a pull hitter. He doesn't even really go to left center all that much, and would be a massive upgrade for the Yankees. If he is available, I think he's a really, really good pick, and would be your cleanup hitter immediately. Not a good defender, but we can sacrifice there. Bo Bichette just got injured. Probably not going to happen.
Michael Caputo saying what you said last week, Jonathan India, and then he said, or Isaac Paredes. So
it sounds, if I read between the lines of some of the reports, I think India is not getting traded.
Right.
And so unfortunately, I think he's probably off the block there. We've talked about Guerrero on the show. Luis Robert Jr., I don't really think it's an option. The Yankees, he's not that good. I think he's a little bit overrated. And
isn't he hurt a lot?
He's been hurt a lot. He hasn't really played much of a full season, and his StatCast numbers aren't great. If you look at his numbers, he's a power hitter without a lot of on base. He's mostly a center fielder. Look, if they traded for him, I'd be happy. He's under control for a while. He's under control till 2027. I just think he's going to be really expensive, and I don't think the Yankees will try. I just don't think he's an option. I just wouldn't be shocked if he's not traded.
I wanted him a couple of years ago. It made sense at the time. But I think he's been hurt twice since then. And listen, if we believe in Jason Dominguez, the Yankees aren't. I mean, I believe they have to go all in this year. But I don't know if that means you go get a guy who's going to be your center fielder for the next 3 years, because where are you going to play all these guys?
Yeah, I'm looking at his StatCast numbers too. He's got a 319 xWOBA. He's got good defensive stats. He's fast. I think he's a little overrated. So I don't think I don't want to trade for him. And I don't think they will. Mason Miller, we've talked about. That'd be fun. Randy Rosarina, I don't know. That doesn't feel like one for the Yankees. But
I hear he's got character things also. There was some stuff in his past, and I don't know. I think if we were to look it up, there's some character issues. Maybe some of our readers could do that for us as we're talking. But you know what? We've had those bad characters.
He's got a 712 OPS on the season.
I don't want
to me. It's just not worth it, and especially since it might cost a little bit. Max Scherzer ain't gonna happen. Pete Alonso.
I don't think the Yankees are getting Mason Miller, by the way.
I don't think he's being traded. Pete Alonso, that's a fun one. Pete Alonso is, I think, would be a massive upgrade at first base. He'd be your cleanup hitter. He'd be just great all around. I think if he's being traded, he is a really good option. Here's the thing, though. The Mets are in the playoffs right now. I don't think the Mets are selling, especially a beloved player like Pete Alonso. And also, he's also not that good. Look, 772 OPS, kind of a Joey Gallo type in a lot of ways. Not a good defender. I don't know. I take him, but because the Yankees really do need a first baseman, but I'm skeptical.
Yeah, I don't. And my goodness, in 1977, the Mets traded Tom Seaver to the Reds. I think they got Pat Zachary, Doug Flynn, and Steve Henderson. And you just don't trade the franchise. You don't trade your big guy. You especially don't do that to the Yankees if you're the Mets and you're trying to play for a pennant and be the exciting team and take away fans from New York, from the other team in New York. You do not give the Yankees Pete Alonso. It's just not going to happen. I mean, I would do it in a minute, but it's not going to happen.
Yeah, the Mets have a little bit of a complex, we'll say, and I think they're the exact kind of team that would not do that. But I'm just looking right now. I've been trying going down the list and just trying to find the interesting ones since we don't have a lot of time. You know, the Diamondbacks are also in the playoffs right now, so I don't think Christian Walker is going anywhere, unfortunately, though I think he would be a fantastic pick. Other teams the Yankees have been connected to. They've been connected to Jazz Chisholm. We talked about that before. Left-handed hitter, not very good. I don't think he makes a lot of sense. Again, another player that you might take if he's free. Let's keep going. We've got Paul Sewald, also the Diamondbacks, probably not going anywhere. Will be a great relief pitcher. The player that I wanted to talk about is Luis Rengifo. So Rengifo, excuse me, you can see his stats. He's having a really strong season. Second baseman, third baseman. He's free agent after next year, so he's a 1.5-year player. The Angels are probably selling. I don't know. Their owner's a little weird. They're not going to make the playoffs. They're not very good. Rengifo is kind of good. He's a player who I think really would improve this team. The Statcast numbers aren't there now that I look at it, so maybe I'm going to take that back. But if he's free, I can see the Yankees taking him on. The other player on this list that I think is even more likely, excuse me, is Taylor Ward. Taylor Ward's numbers, they're not great, right? You can see it right here. We have a 713 OPS, but he's a good defender. He would be your left fielder pretty consistently. He'd replace Verdugo. And then if we just kind of look at his Statcast stats, they are great. Right? We've got a 354 xWOBA. We've got really good expected numbers across the board. Really good, just like discipline numbers. He is good at not swinging at pitches outside the strike zone. He squares up pitches. He's a good, solid hitter, and I think has gotten a little bit unlucky. He is a solid-ish defender, so good enough in left field. Has a good arm. Takes his walks. Like, I think he is, because he is available, I think that he's an upgrade over Verdugo. Or rather, I think it's interesting because he's available. He won't be that expensive. He's an upgrade over Verdugo. Excuse me. We can take a look at his splits really quickly. And what we can see right here is that he destroys left-handed pitching. 904 OPS against lefties, 659 against righties.
So
and
it's
that's
a perfect platoon.
And that's not the xWOBA numbers, right? He is better than those stats, probably against righties. Has just been a little bit unlucky. So he's a part of a platoon. Lane Thomas, I won't bring his stats up, but he's another guy that has very similar, very, very strong platoon splits, and he's a righty, so he's really good against lefties. None of these guys are going to be that expensive. I could imagine the Angels just giving up Rengifo and Ward for very little, just to get their salaries off their books. These are players who are not going to be a part of the next good Angels team. And I think they make the Yankees better. They're not going to solve all the Yankees' problems. I still think they probably need one really good player. But it doesn't take a lot to improve over what they've been putting out there. And if you could give me a 750 OPS, you are the third best hitter in this lineup. maybe fourth best, depending on what you think about Austin Wells. Maybe when Stan gets back, he can be up there too. I just think you gotta take those like singles, right? You got to hit a single right now at the trade deadline because you're currently grounding into a double play every other at bat.
Correct. And you know what? If the Yankees do go big enough and they get a bunch of singles, well, a bunch of singles scores runs.
Right. And
just as much as one big home run. And they have so many holes to fill that one big home run isn't going to fix it.
And it makes a lot of other players look better. All of a sudden, if Ben Rice is your 8-hitter, a little bit of pressure taken off of him, playing pretty well. Maybe he's sitting against a tough lefty. Those all have compounding effects because you're not necessarily getting rid of all the pieces currently on your roster. Maybe it's a Verdugo and Lane Thomas platoon or Verdugo Taylor Ward platoon that allows Verdugo to play up a little bit more, allows Lane Thomas to hit against lefties, and then either of them can come off the bench later in the game. Right? Those are all options that depth on the roster of just good major league player, not good average major league players gives you.
Who become better. In 1979, the Baltimore Orioles won the World. No, they lost in the World Series to the Pittsburgh Pirates, but they went to the World Series. They were one win away from winning the World Series, as I recall. Their left fielders were John Lowenstein and Gary Renicky. Names nobody remembers, but they platooned. It was a strict platoon, and they played better than they were because they were each playing to they were both put in the position to be their best selves. It was smart managing by Earl Weaver, and that's exactly what you're advocating for left field for the Yankees for the rest of the way.
Yeah, and you got to have the pieces to do it, right? Like the problem right now is like if Aaron Boone wants to manage, he's got to put in Jahmai Jones, or he's got to put in Oswaldo Cabrera, or JD Davis has just been missing. They put him on the IL because he was a little sick, and he hasn't played since coming off the IL. He is currently on this roster.
He is,
but we have not seen him in a game in like 3 weeks, right? Like there just aren't options out there for Aaron Boone to make these kind of decisions. And even those guys, they're rusty. Even if you think they have some talent, like they're not playing. And so if you can get to a point where you're regularly playing guys off your bench and putting them in situations where you can succeed. I mean, I look at what the Rays did this weekend against the Yankees. They stacked their lineup against Nestor Cortez. They brought out some talented players, but they said, we're going to go all righties against Cortez because that's our advantage. And it worked, right? They beat Cortez. I think Michael Kay was kind of questioning that move at the beginning of the broadcast, but it was a good move. It worked, or at least it worked. I know it was a good move. Give yourself some options there. And again, these players aren't going to cost Spencer Jones. They're normal trade deadline players that are going to be traded. Maybe a couple of other teams would want them, but no one's going to go like start an auction over Taylor Ward and Luis Renifo, right? That's just not how that works. And then you can try to win the auction for Crochet or Skubal, or if India is available or whatever.
That's what I'm saying. You still got to get the home run guy, but
they need one really good position player: second base, third base, left field, maybe first base, right? Like they need one of those guys, probably a right-handed hitter. But I mean, I'll really take anybody at this point. And they need Giancarlo Stanton to come back healthy. Like those are the two things I think that would really take this roster and make it good. Because if you get to a situation where you can't walk Aaron Judge because you have a credible threat behind him, it doesn't have to be Giancarlo Stanton being a monster, just a player that can hit a home run when you put two guys on. Then Judge gets the pitch, and Judge will hit a home run every third at bat if you throw him strikes. And I think the Yankees still have that potential. And then they just need a little bit of extra scoring below them, right? You got to be in a spot where your 6, 7, 8, 9 hitters will occasionally plate a run, plate one run a game. That's not that hard. But they just haven't been there lately. They haven't been able to get even that.
Good stuff, EJ. Once again, a phenomenal hour. The hour goes so quickly. Before the show, we always go through, I think I'll talk about the Football Hall of Fame. I had neat experience there. We were going to talk about favorite ballparks. I was going to do a little thing about Monument Park, and It's time to make sure we remember the Yankees who deserve to be remembered. And I wasn't even going to go into Roy White this time, who absolutely
we got a long
deserves
off season, Paul. Long off
Yes,
season to talk
there's
about.
always so much to talk about, and it goes too quickly. Next week, we're on the verge of the trade deadline being over.
It's gonna be fun.
It should be fun. Let's hope it is. Everybody, thank you for watching the Start Spreading the News Yankee podcast here on the Northeast Streaming Sports Network. Again, this show is brought to you by Artemisia Publishing. Go get their books, apbooks.net. Check them all out. Super books, super authors, including one who's really, really quite brilliant and good looking. Well, and me too. Have a great night, everybody.